Well, happy Monday. We're here for another live Q&A.
Welcome in, everybody.
Well, we're excited as always to answer some questions. We've got some similar ones, some different ones today that we're excited to get into. Just kind of jump right in. Brittany asks us, as a launching solo practice, how much should I expect/plan to pay for overhead costs?
Oh, good question. Actually pretty low. The nice thing is this is a service-based industry, and so there's not like cost of goods sold or other things. The biggest decisions that you really have to make for cost is going to be maybe like your location. So if you're deciding to do like an office, other than that, it's just a few $100s for like registration fees, a few $100s on insurance, a few $100s on um, maybe like your Wi-Fi or your computer setup. Computer might be a few hundred to $1,000
Yeah,
if you want to get a little bit of a bigger computer. And then other than that, utilities can be pretty low if you're just using like a home office. That's just built into what you've got going on there. Otherwise, your office space is going to be really your bigger cost. Other than that, I would just maybe partition your cash as far as like what's coming in for tax. How much? Oh yeah, EMR is the other expense, maybe the early
yeah.
expense, like $100 there. And so really maybe like your total overhead is like $1,000 a month, just miscellaneous things, and then whether you want an office or not. Josh,
Yeah.
did I miss anything there?
I mean, without going line by line, and we do have a video that you could search for in the Facebook group or even YouTube, where maybe a couple months ago we said like costs in private practice, and we went with solos and groups and listed out a bunch of the common costs and things you might pay. So it might be a deeper resource to check out there. However, I think sub $1,000 on a monthly basis for all of your technology, all of your whatever it is that you need to run, maybe separate from an office space. And we know so many people, even if they want an office space long term, they get the business going, they serve their clients virtual for a while, or they rent an office for one day a week part time through another therapist or something like that till the cash kind of catches up with them. But in your location, some places are going to be $1,000 a month for the office plus the insurance and all of those things. But a couple of the majors, you're going to have formation costs. Every state is different there. If you pay someone to file your LLC or get your PLLC, whatever it is that you're doing, that's going to cost a little bit of money or maybe a lot of bit of money. We're talking sub $100 to several $100s maybe to get that formation all put together, but still overall cheap. And then your liability insurance, your EMR, and maybe some adjacent software, maybe some marketing initially, like Psychology Today or a website or some of those things. You can keep it really tight knit and bootstrapped with free services, free processes if you really want to. Otherwise, you can spend a lot more. So I think those are some general takeaways. But the need to spend money as a solo private practice is actually pretty low. So overall, you need a couple clients a month to service a full set of whatever costs you need, to break even and then go beyond. With that, Mackenzie asks us, brand new private practice starting out, what's the best way to get your name out there when you do have a specific niche?
You do have a specific niche. Um, I think the number one tried and true method is just always be on the listing sites. And so like 2 to 5 listing sites, no matter what who it is that you're working with. Maybe if you give me more specific information, there's almost a directory for every niche.
Yeah.
And so keep your eyes peeled maybe for something like that. And then if you do have a niche, I think they'll respect and see that you're a little bit different inside of some of those listing sites. Plus there's such a low cost, you may as well just do it. I think the other best ways to maybe look at this is if you have a specific niche, can you reach them in places like Facebook groups? Can you reach them in places like, like maybe magazines? Like, where are their eyeballs and can you enter in there? Do you have to
Right.
enter in there with money? Do you have to enter in there organically? And so don't be afraid to just like go see where the fish are, like what ponds the fish are in, and see if you can insert yourself into those ponds. Um, in certain instances, depending on what your niche is, depending on what you're considering your niche, it might be really easy to just run paid advertisements to people who are interested in
Yeah.
certain things. Or it might be easier for you to just join a Facebook group and provide some valuable content to those individuals, like psychoeducation or otherwise, or just engage on a personal relational level. And so I would just maybe look at your niche, see where their eyeballs are at, and see what kind of angles you might be able to take, because just about every niche can be reached, even if that means you have to like go host seminars at hospitals, or even if that means you have to go build relationships with uh, universities or whatever. So
Yeah.
as far as niches go, that might be just how I'd angle it.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add there. So headed over to Milton. He asks us, how do you identify your core online client without clinical words? Uh,
Identify your core online client.
yep.
Okay. Identify your core. I don't know if I understand that question too well. What are you
I think
taking
it,
from it?
I'll
Yeah, go
take
ahead.
a crack at it.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing what it's getting at is, that label of anxiety, or that person who needs trauma work done, or that person who is fill in the blank for the clinical label that a therapist would typically identify a client with. How do we label that, find that? I think a good one is someone who needs like relationship counseling, and there could be a million reasons why that is. Or someone who has trauma. Is that complex trauma? Is that like the big T versus the little T trauma? Is that, how aware is your user demographic? And that's where I would actually start, is take that clinical term, right? Oh, I work with adults with complex PTSD, or I work with, couples that are on the brink of divorce, right? That on the brink of divorce is very different language than whatever label or term you would probably diagnose for why that couple is on the brink of divorce. And that's actually how you do it, is how would the client in their current state describe themselves, right? So someone who's experiencing the relationship issues that they need to find services with, someone who's experiencing the the brokenheartedness, the bitterness, the whatever it is, someone who's experiencing crippling social anxiety, like there's clinical depression, there's all these other things that you could layer in someone. But how would they describe what they're experiencing? How would they label themselves? And the first place, and we've talked about this often, that you can sometimes find this is in consult calls or in form fills or some of those things, when you ask, like, what are you looking for? What do you need help with? Right. And they actually just tell you. So if you have 5, 10, 20 plus people who use similar language in these forms, well, that's your ideal client language that you need to serve back to them. Hey, people who feel like that they're on the brink of divorce, because if I'm seeking therapy because I'm on the brink of divorce, whatever it is, we can serve that back to them.
Yeah, I'll repackage your answer because I started understanding midway through. So I'll repackage this as saying we're using tribal language, the language that they're telling us. We're using the emotions that they're feeling, and so you're feeling stressed about your relationships. And so don't listen to it from a therapist perspective. Listen to it from a, what are they saying? How are they revealing this information to me? And so what this might look like, we had an awesome example of how to do this, but just maybe keep a notebook, a little journal for your sessions, and just take note of the language, take note of what they feel, what they think, instead of listening as a therapist and like trying to put labels or trying to put information on it, because more often than not, people just don't understand those terms or those things. One really great example that I have is we had a therapist that particularly works with couples, and the reason why she works with
Yeah.
couples is because she loves that they oftentimes they have like boundary issues, and so there's this boundary issue that the therapist is seeing and perceiving, but the person doesn't perceive that. They perceive that they can't get what they want from the relationship, and they feel down or bad about it. And so there has to be a translation and a switch between your brain to the client's brain.
Yeah. No one, we have some counselors who work with women with like really strong self-esteem issues. Regardless of why that self-esteem issues are there, No client who's coming to see them is like antenna up. I have self-esteem issues, right? Even though that's like a classic, easy to conceptualize term. Even if you told that client, like, oh, you're experiencing self-esteem issues, they're like, oh yeah, maybe, right? So what is the way that they would experience and describe the issues? I'm not getting the advancements at work and career. I'm not feeling valued by my partner. I'm not finding love. I'm not finding, I'm not able to set boundaries. I'm whatever it is. You can go down this rabbit hole pretty significantly. And then you can even take it a step further. One of the things we recommend to our clients a lot is to put their ad copy, put their site today profiles, whatever it is, put their website content into a grade level reading checker. And even for your short little snippets of I serve blank, blank, and blank client, you can put this into a grade level reading checker. You can just Google one and insert the content, and it will give you a vague, this is an eighth grade, this is a 12th grade, this is a college level, this is a third grade reading level. And the reason why we do that is two reasons. Number one, the more clinical jargon you use, the higher that grade level is going to be perceived as. And so, one, if you get a really high level, you're probably gonna be like, oh, I probably need to figure out how to par this down. But the other thing is even if it feels like really simple language and you're at a 12th grade reading level, people's ability to innately read quickly, identify, and make a decision off of the information, it doesn't mean that they can't read at a 12th grade reading level or read at an 8th grade reading level. But if you get that down to a 5th grade or a 3rd grade, it's going to be much simpler language. The sky is blue is very different than using a much more complex way to be like, oh my gosh, the sky is so beautiful. The hues and the tones of, of the aquamarine of the sea. Like, okay, whatever. So it can just be an indication of like how consumable or quickly can the client read the thing, react to the thing, and see themselves as part of the thing and move forward through the process. So that would just be a practical tip on how to see if you're doing a good job of this.
Yeah, really good
Anything else to add
pointer.
there?
No, third, write something for third graders and then write something for seventh graders and use that as your range for how to communicate quickly and effectively. Intelligent individuals, for those of you who are like, I don't want to work with people, intelligent individuals can recognize when something is simple and see when it's been simplified for consumption. And so it will not exclude individuals who are, higher tier, if that's your niche, higher
Yeah.
tier in education, I should say.
And a good other way to measure this is, let's say you're as complex as you have two web pages on your website, or you have two listing site profiles for two of your therapists on your team, whatever it is. Do a more complicated one and do a more simple one and like switch it out, see which one converts better, right? Literally, it's what we call a split test, because the market will speak to you. You'll get more opt-ins for the same amount of traffic. So if 100 people view your website, you'll get 10 of them to fill out the form instead of 3 of them, when you do this better and better. And so you can continue to refine that and see if there's a measurable difference in how well you do this. Ads are a really great way to test this because you can put all of your copy, all of your offer, all of your language call out directly in the ad and in the call to action and see if people click on it or fill out the form and go from there. And then that can get distributed into all of your other places. And then as we kind of wrap up on this one, Clarice asks us, how do you get grants or extra capital as a startup, and tips on navigating through the regulations in our industry? This is a really pertinent question, especially since we had a couple others regarding like startup costs or startup capital. I think whether like both how you get it and whether it's necessary really depends on how quickly you're going to see cash return back to you. To be totally blunt, I don't think Attilio and I are equipped to answer this question if you were trying to do like a venture backed startup, because we have made the choice to bootstrap any businesses that we have done, which just means we've put our own money in and scaled it at the speed of cash. So that's what we're comfortable with, and that's what we're familiar with. So we don't push the practices that we work with, and we don't push ourselves to go outside and get loans or get capital in order to interject that. What we find for more traditional services, we're talking the regular talk therapy, sort of one-to-one sessions, either with a team or just you as an individual. It's typically healthier because again, you can do it in a low overhead way. You don't have to go buy a building right away. You don't have to do some of these other things. It's typically cheaper and safer on a risk level not to pursue a lot of those things. That being said, a couple places you can look. Your local town, city, state probably has some accelerator programs that would even be available for a like private practice who's launching. And sometimes they, once you apply, there's capital allocations attached to those programs, or they help you apply for grants specifically. There's also through the Small Business Administration startup loans and small business loans that you can pursue and dig into it from that perspective. And you're going to have to go through the process to apply for those. Typically, that they're going to want to see some sort of business plan and the rate of return. How quickly are you going to get to cash? What's the likelihood that you're going to pay back that loan? Sometimes you need to put up collateral. It could really go down the rabbit hole there. And then I'd say a lot of the really great grants are probably available for nonprofits. So if you are like a 501c3 or some iteration of that, like Google does a $10,000 a month Google Ads grant for 6 months or 12 months and then beyond, even if you are a nonprofit, that they grant for like almost anyone that you can really apply into. And there's a number of others by state, by city, by town to kind of apply. Your mission, your values, your business plan, and your speed of cash is going to be really important and determinant on whether you can acquire those and dig into those. But in my experience, after talking with literally thousands of private practice owners, it's only the ones that are investing heavily into like brick and mortar locations for additional services outside talk therapy, talking like TMS or ketamine or Neurostar, like some of those adjacent mental health services that are typically the ones raising funds or capital. Otherwise, we kind of recommend going at the speed of cash because it's a very reasonable way to like build the business. And we've literally seen people at the speed of cash go from 0 to 100K a month plus, in under 12 months.
Yeah, I have maybe a couple of things to add here. I've done the whole startup thing. I had a startup and I failed it. I failed it with a group of guys, and we went the whole route: private equity, grants, the whole song and dance. We did it all. I went through that process. I know what it looks like. Like Josh said, for a service-based business like this, usually you don't have something so unique or so high in intellectual property that, quite frankly, anyone would even put funding in. And so there's a couple options for you, like the SBA. You might even be able to like open up and apply at like through a bank, like through your business bank. You might be able to find a couple outlets where there are grants, and you can just Google search like grants for businesses, and I'm sure that there'll be a few resources for you there. Um, but it's going to require a significant amount of time and energy. We've worked with practices that do grant applications and it takes them a month to get them out or more. And so if you ask me, the reason why I think Josh and I are in the same camp here, where it's just like move at the speed of cash. Quite frankly, you could take like 4 or 5 BetterHelp clients, use that to fund advertisement, and get 3 to 5 clients in the first month. I mean, and you don't have to spend time and energy putting up this whole grant business plan thing that could get denied. And so honestly, between like cost and benefit, and between like raw what is actually required of you to be successful, it's going to come down to just sitting down, doing the thing, getting feedback and improving on it, versus having $5 or $10,000 in your bank and saying, what do I do now? And then you spend it and blow it and you didn't learn anything because you just made the money for free. And so I might take a little bit of time and energy to rather than spending it on trying to plan and create this perfect proposal for someone, either private equity, bank, or grant, or otherwise, to just like give you the money essentially, or give you the money with some attachment to it. aka private equity, like a percentage of your business as like a loan style where there's interest and you have to pay back stuff.
Yeah.
Just go in, take a few clients, do some of the dirty work, get in the trenches, figure out what your clients want as far as marketing and advertising go, and go from there. Remember, you're in a service-based business, and so you don't have to buy inventory. You don't have
Right.
to have a lot of cash like down to be able to like run and operate your practice. And so leverage that. Service-based businesses are awesome. You don't have to have funding to really jump in and go do it. All you really have to do to be successful is have the licensure. So have the
Right.
licensure. You can accept clients today and learn how to market and advertise yourself. So
Yeah.
that's all I
And
got.
the last two pieces I would add, because we don't talk about this a lot, but is helpful and important, is there can be some really great fiscal decisions made around buying your own building or buying a space versus just like renting it and get into the commercial end of the real estate for yourself. And those are actually times when loans can make a lot of sense, specifically like if you're able to get a building that has other tenants in it and it gives you a place to expand at a later time, and they're sort of paying that loan amount on your behalf. There's some really financial interesting things that you can do and leverage money for on a brick and mortar location level that can go really interesting. And the other thing that we've also seen is loans are much more easily granted, especially through like the Small Business Administration and other places, when you are buying an existing business with cash flow. And depending on how you want to cut your teeth into the space, how experienced you are, your current size of the practice, that can be an interesting way to expand. I just saw a thread earlier today about someone being like, "Hey, I think I'm ready to sell my group practice. Like, here are the numbers. Where do I go next?" Right? And that's where like you could actually step in, use capital that you raise to your advantage, and or get a loan, purchase something that's already cash flowing, and have a level of safety, but leveraging that type of cheaper money. Loans are also more expensive than they ever have been before right now, commercial and residential, for real estate and just in general. So there's an ebb and flow to that process, and the numbers just have to make sense. So our last comment or tip here is get financial help from accountants, from your CPAs, from business advisors in a more concrete way. If you are really digging into financial trenches that you are not experienced with on loans and other things, because we have seen people get into some really crazy hot water and just like burn themselves and essentially their business to the ground accidentally, right? Because they didn't realize how flammable going down this path is.
Yeah, great point.
That's it for today, guys. We appreciate you tuning in. As always, shoot us a message, post in the Facebook group if you want a question answered every single Monday. We'll see you guys next